Good morning, Americas. Good afternoon, Africa and Europe. Good evening, Australia, Asia, and New Zealand. Hello, Antarctica. I am your host today, Touring News, or Brad, if you like to call me that. Hello, YouTube, if you're out there. Nice to see you. I appreciate the support. Hello, Twitch, if you are there as well. I just about have everything opened that I want to. On today's program, we will be discussing a typhoon in the Philippines, Myanmar elections, United States investment firms linked to the Chinese military being blocked by Donald Trump, President Xi reportedly halting the $37 billion Ant IPO personally. United States judge extends the TikTok deadline. Manila is paralyzed after a typhoon. Australia appoints a special investigator over war crimes. French troops kill commander of Al-Qaeda-linked group in Mali. Deutsche Bank wants to tax workers that work from home. Germany charges 12 in a far-right terror plot. Philippines scrambles to rescue after the typhoon. More fires in Australia. South Korea cases of COVID-19 rise above 200. Face mask fines ensue. Peru president faces calls to resign after protesters have been killed. Mexico reaches 1 million COVID cases and nearly 100,000 deaths. Honduras and Guatemala brace for an oncoming storm. Peru youth saying, "I'm so tired of this," they remain in the streets. Peru is fired up as protests erupt amid the coup. Deforestation in Brazil rises for the first time in 4 months. Brazil says China COVID vaccine trial can resume after suspension. Armenia says it prevented murder attempt on Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Moldova torn between Russia and the West in a presidential runoff. A lot of conflict in Ethiopia as Tigray forces target airports on the 14th of November. Police are seeking lists of ethnic Tigrayans from the 13th of November. Tigray leader confirms the bombing of the Eritrean capital 15th of November today. Ethiopia Prime Minister claims major advance in the Tigray region from the 12th. And Ethiopia appoints a new Tigray leader as Amnesty reports a massacre from the 13th. United Nations fears Ethiopia refugee emergency and warns of aid being blocked. Zambia to default on foreign debt, their finance minister says. Russia plans a naval base in Sudan. Algerians approve a new constitution after a referendum. Tensions persist as Libya's warring sides debate a road to peace. Guinea arrests the opposition leaders after a disputed election. Civilians reel as violence spins out of control in Mozambique. United Nations urges Mozambique to investigate the murder and beheadings. Emery Mwazulu Diabanza, France is still a colonial country. Sudan braces for 200,000 fleeing Ethiopian fighting. Clashes in Ivory Coast, vote as neighboring states urge talks. Nigeria protests a once-in-a-generation moment for change. Azerbaijan extends Armenian pullout deadline from Kabayar. Ethnic Armenian villagers burn houses before the Azerbaijani takeover. Afghan forces claim to capture the mastermind of the Kabul University attack. Suicide car bomb blast in Kabul kills many soldiers. Ethnic Armenians prepare to give up their homes in Nagorno-Karabakh. India-China close in on a plan to end months of a border standoff. India-Pakistan report deadly violence along the Kashmir border. Indian law and foreign funding a tool to silence civil society. Bangladesh extends school shutdown over a second COVID-19 wave. India gives more help to farms hit by coronavirus. It's time to revolutionize how we talk about the weather. The Green Read from Al Jazeera. Second Afghan journalist killed in a week. Indian central bank data point for the first time ever to recession. India's capital sees a surge in COVID-19 infections. Surge in India's pollution levels explained in 500 words. Australia appoints a special investigator over alleged war crimes. I think I already had this article. India to regulate online news and social media sites. Will Biden stay on the course set by Trump in Afghanistan? Pakistani Al-Qaeda bomb maker killed in Afghanistan. Development banks pledge climate action but keep fossil fuels. Freezer scarcity, patchy power temper COVID-19 vaccine hopes in India. The pipeline that could complicate the reset of United States-Canada relations. RCEP, Asia-Pacific nations sign world's biggest trade pact. Universal healthcare critical in COVID-19 pandemic. Israeli agents claim they killed Al-Qaeda's number 2 in Iran in August. Tigray forces target airports, threaten Eritrea. I think I had that article. 3 years after the Mugabe overthrow, many Zimbabweans say life is worse. We also had this article before. 74 migrants are dead in a devastating shipwreck off of Libya. United Nations expert calls for immediate lifting of sanctions against Qatar. Saudi Red Sea project plans 16 hotels by 2023 to boost tourism. Content warning. Countdown to catastrophe in Yemen as United Nations again warns of famine. Yemenis not going hungry, they are being starved, says United Nations as warn of a looming famine. Saudi king urges the world to take decisive stance against Iran. Louis Dreyfus sells stake in a family business to the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund. Syrian's President Bashar al-Assad says United States pressure obstructing the refugee return. Sudan, I think we had this one also. Dozens killed in a gruesome bus attack in western Ethiopia, November 15th. Azerbaijan extends the Armenian pullout deadline. We had that one already. Israel advances plans in sensitive East Jerusalem settlement. Saudi minister slams the German arms ban. Israel attacks Hamas positions after rockets fired from Gaza. Ethiopians fleeing the Tigray war recount horrors as the fighting rages. Can I get this to drag all the way over here? Whoops. I just messed up. My mouse is breaking, everybody. Libya's war in 500 words. Iran denies claims Al-Qaeda member killed in Tehran. Israeli agents killed... we had that one. And Palestinian Prime Minister Pompeo visit would set a dangerous precedent. Was that really worth your time, Ebeda? Also, a potential potato famine in northern India. Okay, so to begin with, Ethiopia, I think is where it will start. Okay, so which of these articles is the oldest? 13, 14, 14, 15, 12. Okay. From the 12th of November, 2020, Ethiopian Prime Minister claims major advances in the Tigray region. With communications down and media barred, independent verification of the status of the conflict was impossible. Ethiopia's Prime Minister has claimed that the western Tigray region has been liberated after a week of fighting, while United Nations agencies warn of a dire humanitarian situation worsening by the day. The western region of Tigray has been liberated, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said on Twitter on Tuesday. The army is now providing humanitarian assistance and services. It also is feeding the people. With communications down and media barred, independent verification of the status on the conflict was impossible. Fears over a spiraling conflict are mounting since the federal government's decision to embark last week on a military campaign after it accused the Tigray People's Liberation Front of attacking sections of federal military stations. The fighting is still going on between ground troops on both sides, with airstrikes targeting fuel and arms depots that have caused significant casualties on both sides, said Al Jazeera's Mohammed Adaw, reporting from the capital Addis Ababa. The government said it would not stop the operation until it reaches its objectives of ensuring the TPLF are disarmed, their leadership brought to justice, and any fugitives reprehended. Hello, Kobe, Makore, its Spiritus, and John McCain's ghost. I think I have to sneeze. Tigray's president, Debretsion Gebremichael, who is chairman of the TPLF, told Reuters news agency that government airstrikes had killed an unspecified number of civilians in recent days. Telephone lines in the region are still down. Transport is not allowed to and from Tigray, as a result of which shortages of basic commodities are reportedly appearing, impacting the most vulnerable first and foremost. 11,000 people have crossed from Ethiopia to Sudan fleeing the conflict since fighting started. An estimated 50% of them are children. They're coming with very, very little possessions, and most have come in a healthy condition. We've had information of some who have been injured. On the 13th of November, one day after the previous article, Ethiopia appoints a new Tigray leader. Amnesty reports a massacre. Parliament appoints a new head of the Tigray region. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed announces as Amnesty says many civilians have been killed in the fighting. Ethiopia's parliament has appointed a new head of the Tigray region. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said his prominent rights group reported a massacre of scores of civilians in the conflict. Dr. Mulu Nega has been appointed as the chief executive of the Tigray regional state. On Thursday, 3 days ago, Ethiopian parliament stripped Tigray President Debretsion Gebremichael, who was elected in September and chairs the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, of immunity from prosecution. Amnesty International said scores of civilians were killed in a massacre in the Tigray that witnesses blamed on forces backing the local ruling party in its fight against the federal government. It was the first reported incident of large-scale civilian fatalities in a week-old conflict between the TPLF and the federal government led by Abiy. Amnesty International can today confirm that scores and likely hundreds of people were stabbed or hacked to death in Mai Kadera, in the southwest zone of the Tigray region on the night of November 9th. Amnesty said they digitally verified gruesome photographs and videos of bodies strewn across the town or being carried away on stretchers. The dead had gaping wounds that appeared to have been inflicted by sharp weapons such as knives and machetes. The victims appeared to have been civilians, laborers who were in no way involved in the ongoing military offensive in the region. The region still appears to be under a communications blackout. Thursday, Abiy government forces claimed to have liberated the western zone of Tigray, made up of 6 zones, including the capital and surrounding areas. The report also said the TPLF forces had captured... Regional state media in Tigray countered that pro-TPLF forces had retaken territory, and they had captured 10,000 soldiers. An estimated 20,000 are waiting to cross at the border still. Once they arrive in Sudan, Morgan said, refugees are screened for both health and security reasons. Because Sudanese authorities suspect former combatants who are putting down their weapons and escaping the fighting may also flee to Sudan. Refugees are saying the humanitarian situation was bleak, that there's a shortage of food and clean water. From November 13th as well, Ethiopian police are seeking lists of ethnic Tigrayans. A United Nations report underlining fears over ethnic undertones of the conflict. Police chief ordered identification of ethnic Tigrayans from NGOs. Police visited the United Nations World Food Program WFP in the Amhara region to request a list of Tigrayan staff, according to an internal UN security report seen by Reuters on Friday. They claimed that they needed them to identify ethnic Tigrayans from all over government agencies and NGOs. Underlines fears over ethnic undertones to the federal troops' push against the leaders of the northern Tigray province. Long-running tensions between the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the Tigray People's Liberation Front hit a new low in September when Tigray pressed ahead with its own elections. From the 14th of November, 2020. Tigray forces target airports, threaten Eritrea. Rockets strike 2 airports in Ethiopia's Amhara state bordering the Tigray region, raising fears of the conflict escalating. Leaders of Ethiopia's northern Tigray region claimed rocket attacks on 2 airports in a nearby region and threatened to strike neighboring Eritrea, raising fears the escalating conflict could spread. 2 airports in the Amhara state were targeted on Friday, with one of the rockets hitting the airport in Gondar, partially damaging it. A second projectile fired simultaneously landed just outside the airport at Bahir Dar. The United Nations, the African Union, and others are concerned the fighting could spread to other parts of Ethiopia, Africa's second most populous country, and destabilize the wider Horn of Africa region. 14,500 people have fled into neighboring Sudan, with the speed of new arrivals overwhelming the current capacity to provide aid. Abiy accuses the TPLF, which governs the mountainous region of more than 5 million people, of treason and terrorism. Federal troops say the TPLF rose against them last week, but have since survived a siege. The federal troops have been carrying out air raids and fighting on the ground since the 4th of November. Today, Tigray leader confirms the bombing of the Eritrean capital. Tigray troops are fighting 16 divisions of the Eritrean army in addition to Ethiopian soldiers, the region's leader says. The leader of Ethiopia's Tigray region has said forces bombed the airport in neighboring Eritrea's capital, a major escalation as the heavy fighting in northern Ethiopia between federal government troops and Tigray forces spread across an international border. Tigray's president did not say how many missiles were fired at Asmara on Saturday, but said it was the only city in Eritrea that was targeted. At least 3 rockets were fired at Asmara on Saturday evening, 5 diplomats told Reuters. 2 projectiles hit the city's airport. One of the rockets fired is claimed to have been aimed at a building housing the Eritrean Ministry of Information and a number of local media outlets. Missed the mark, but it fell outside the building. No word on casualties as of yet. It's a huge escalation of the conflict that has so far been restricted to the borders of Ethiopia, and particularly to the Tigray region. Now it crossed international borders and is something that could bring Eritrea into conflict. The fighting has killed hundreds of people on both sides, sent thousands of civilians fleeing into Sudan, and raised fears it could destabilize other parts of Ethiopia and the wider Horn of the African region. Abiy said the government warplanes were bombing military targets in Tigray, including arms depots and equipment controlled by the Tigrayan forces. As the fighting intensifies, fears of ethnic attacks are rising. Ethiopia's Human Rights Commission, appointed by the government but independent, said it was sending a team of investigators to investigate the reports of mass killings in Mai Kadera. The Tigray state government denied any involvement by TPLF members or the state special police force in the most tragic event. I believe that is everything that I have in the ongoing conflict. There is one further story from the 12th of November. United Nations fears Ethiopia refugee emergency and warns of aid being blocked 3 days ago. They're worried about a refugee emergency if more civilians are forced to flee the fighting between federal and local forces in northern Ethiopia. In one of the previous articles, it was estimated that 50% of the people fleeing were children. That does conclude the report on Ethiopia. Moving to a different continent, news out of the Philippines.
The traditional economic models are not good at predicting that.
Beginning with the 12th of November, Manila paralyzed after Typhoon Vamco sweeps across the Philippines. Southeast nation pummeled by a 6th storm in 5 weeks, adding more pain to devastated communities. Torrential rain from the typhoon deluged provinces on the Philippines' main island of Luzon on Thursday, killing several people, paralyzing parts of Manila, and bringing more misery to the communities still trying to clean up after Typhoon Goni, which struck at the beginning of the month. 11 people died, 9 others missing. 1.9 million households were without power in Manila and nearby provinces. Many electricity poles toppled, power lines knocked down, power transformers were damaged. In a brief video showing what was happening. I'll link it in if you want to. 6 storms in 5 weeks. Arlen Rodriguez, a resident in Marikina City, said she was awaiting rescue with 20 others, mostly children and elderly, after the floodwaters rose quickly. It's heartbreaking to see a population in the grip of the COVID pandemic facing another severe storm, the 6th to hit the Philippines in the past 5 weeks. From the 13th of November, the typhoon death toll rose as cleanup begins. 26 people have been confirmed dead, with dozens still missing after Vamco triggered floods and landslides. Tens of thousands of homes were submerged by floods as key highways turned into rivers. Many people remained without power or water supplies on Friday morning. Residents take refuge on rooftops, and the agency said it rescued around 6,000 people from across the capital's suburbs. Oh my God. The 21st typhoon to hit the Philippines this year submerged parts of suburban Manila, now heading toward Vietnam. And the final article from yesterday. We believe it'll take more than a week before the flood subsides if there's no further rain. The city of 163,000 people is cut off because the roads were flooded. We're already on the 3rd day on top of our roof. We need relief goods and clothing because we saved nothing. Vamco is the 13th big storm to hit the country this year. In Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi party confirmed the winner in the elections. They secured the 322 seats in the bicameral legislature needed to form a government. The NLD has taken 346 of the 412 seats that have been declared, with results from 64 more yet to be announced. Aung San Suu Kyi had a turbulent first term marked by a brutal crackdown in 2017 on the ethnic Rohingya that's now the subject of a genocide investigation. A failure to make significant headway in the country's myriad of ethnic conflicts, and now the coronavirus. Myanmar suffered nearly 50 years of isolation and decay under strict military rule, and Aung San Suu Kyi herself spent many years under house arrest before generals began to loosen their hold on power and the elections were first held in 2011. Results are being questioned by the opposition party, the military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party. In a short story from South Korea, COVID cases have risen above 200, face mask fines are starting. Health authorities say private gatherings, public events are fueling the rise in cluster cases that are complicated to trace. 166 locally transmitted, 39 imported. More than 65% of the locally transmitted cases were from Seoul and Gyeonggi province, densely populated region near the capital. Now there will be a fine for not wearing a face mask. If you are not wearing a mask in a nightclub, mall, theme park, hair salon, you'll face a fine of 100,000 won, equivalent to $89.75, while the operators of the places could pay as much as 3 million won in fines. Staying within the Asian continent, Chinese President Xi is claimed to have personally halted the $37 billion Ant IPO from a report by, I am unsure who, the Wall Street Journal, citing Chinese officials with knowledge of the matter. The decision to stop what would have been the world's largest IPO came days after the financial tech giant's billionaire founder Jack Ma launched a public attack on the country's financial watchdogs and banks. Xi ordered the Chinese regulators to investigate and effectively shut down the stock market flotation. Ma told a summit in Shanghai on the 24th of October that the regulatory system was stifling innovation and must be reformed to fuel growth. Earlier this month, Reuters reported the speech set off a chain of events that torpedoed the listing of Ant. Soon after Ma's scathing speech, state regulators started compiling reports, including one on how Ant had used digital financial products like Huobi, a virtual credit card service, to encourage poor and young people to build up debt. Current United States President Donald Trump has signed an executive order that blocks United States investment in firms Washington believes are linked to the Chinese military. Don T. signed an executive order banning investments in Chinese firms that Washington claims are owned or controlled by the Chinese military. It could affect some of China's biggest companies, including telecom firms China Telecom Corp., China Mobile, and surveillance maker Hikvision. The move is designed to deter United States investment firms, pension funds, and others from buying and selling shares of 31 Chinese companies that were designated by the Defense Department as backed by the Chinese military. The order will ban any transaction by United States investors I got lost in the article, I apologize. Starting on January 11th, 9 days before Trump is due to leave office and Democratic President-elect Biden is scheduled to be inaugurated. In the executive order, Trump said he found China was increasingly exploiting United States capital to resource and to enable the development and modernization of its military, intelligence, and other security apparatus, which continued to allow the PRC to directly threaten the United States homeland and the United States overseas. And I believe the final Chinese news for the day. United States judge extends the TikTok deadline amid a Trump battle. ByteDance was facing a Thursday deadline to comply with Trump's order to sell TikTok. Now they've set dates for the 14th of December and 28th of December for Trump administration to file motions and other documents in the case. They are facing a deadline on Thursday to comply with an order from Trump's to sell TikTok U.S. operations. The deal was never finalized to divest part of it to Oracle and Walmart. It's been stuck in limbo for weeks. Trump's order requiring the sale by the 12th of November allows for a 30-day extension of the deadline, but the new dates go past that period. Trump's executive order from August doesn't stipulate a clear punishment for failure to divest. In two stories from Australia, Australia appoints a special investigator over the alleged war crimes. Investigator will decide whether to prosecute members of the military over crimes allegedly committed in Afghanistan. On the 12th of November, Australia will announce and appoint a special investigator to determine whether to prosecute members of the country's military for alleged war crimes committed in Afghanistan, as the country prepared for the release of a 4-year inquiry into the allegations. The government initially tried to suppress whistleblower accounts of the alleged wrongdoing, with police moving to investigate the reporters involved. Meanwhile, it also began into a probe what are called rumors and allegations. Of possible breaches of the law of armed conflict. Morrison said a redacted version of the report will be released. I am so tired of everything being redacted. Please, can any politician just run on declassifying documents? Any one of you. Australia faces more fires, drought, as climate continues to heat. Country's Weather Bureau says higher temperatures and less rainfall creating conditions for more extreme weather events. Australia's climate is expected to become hotter and drier, increasing the risk of drought and extreme weather events such as bushfires that devastated swaths of the southeastern Australian country in the last southern hemisphere, in the southern... I'm botching whatever that said. The Bureau of Meteorology's latest State of the Climate report blames carbon emissions for the increase in extreme heat, noting that a hotter Australia will affect the lives and livelihoods of everyone who lives there. Australia needs to plan for and adapt to the changing nature of the climate risk. Now and in the decades ahead, reducing global greenhouse gas emissions will lead to less warming and fewer impacts. Australia's climate has warmed on average by 1.44 degrees centigrade since national records began in 1910. The country experienced its warmest year on record in 2019, and the 7 years from 2013 to 2019, all ranked among the 9 warmest years ever. Australia is far short of even meeting its Paris Agreement target of cutting carbon emissions by 26% by 2030 compared with 2005 levels. Fire seasons are getting longer. Coral reefs are bleaching faster. I thought I had an article about climate here. Is it time to revolutionize how we talk about the weather? Over the past 50 years, the accuracy of cyclone forecasts has improved, but the way we communicate the risks have not. On the 12th of November, the world marks the 50th anniversary of Cyclone Bola and the associated storm surge that killed an estimated 300,000 to 500,000 people, the deadliest tropical cyclone ever recorded and one of the deadliest natural disasters. It precipitated a series of events that eventually led to the Bangladesh War of Independence and to Bangladesh gaining independence from Pakistan in 1971. Cyclones now could pose a greater danger than ever, and one of those countries is Fiji. A cyclone occurs when very low air pressure results in a higher than normal sea level near the cyclone's center. When this rise in water level under the cyclone is combined with a high tide or strong onshore winds, floodwaters can surge inland as the cyclone makes landfall. If you look at their cases, they're having a huge upsurge in cases at the moment right now. I'm not entirely sure what you mean, Eagles. Also, they are pretty sparse, even though they are densely populated within Stockholm. It's a nation of only, 8 or 9 million people, pretty spread out. They also have a high percentage of living separately, so they don't have a lot of multi-family housing. They did do a lot of work from home. But cases are surging. Death rate is considerably higher than their neighboring countries. So I don't exactly know what you're going for. French troops kill commander of Al-Qaeda-linked group in Mali. Ba-Ag Moussa was killed in an operation involving ground troops and helicopters, claimed the French Defense Minister Florence Parly. French troops killed the top commander of an Al-Qaeda-linked armed group in Mali this week. The target of the attack was identified as Ba-Ag Moussa, the military head of the group to support Islam and Muslims, the GSIM, and was believed to be behind multiple attacks on both Malian and international forces. A historic figure of the jihadist movement in the Sahel, they were considered to be responsible for several attacks against Malian and international forces. Considered to be the right-hand man of Iyad Ag-Ghali, the leader of Mali's most prominent armed group, Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, JNIM. France has around 5,100 soldiers in the Sahel region, which runs through Mali, to fight armed groups, some allied with Al-Qaeda, others with ISIS or ISIL. They claim it's a major success in the fight against terrorism. In a recap of a story from a week prior, or a few days prior, and one that I don't have to read through to know what it says, Deutsche Bank wants to charge a 5% tax on any person who wants to work from home but is being provided an office by Deutsche. They claim this is going to raise around $80 billion that they can then pay their lower income staff who don't have the opportunity to work from home. For years, we have needed a tax on remote workers. COVID has just made it obvious. Really, really trying hard not to curse right now. I'm trying to do a good news program today, and I'm trying to just read through the news. Deutsche Bank says the 5% tax is justified because people who work from home are contributing less to the infrastructure of the economy while still receiving its benefits. Okay, so if this is actually true, Deutsche, okay, let's say that your framing has some kind of merit. Why wouldn't it be the state that levies the tax and not the corporation? That way they can redistribute the profits amongst their shareholders and CEOs. Okay, even if you had even if you had legs to stand on. Deutsche Bank reckons in the United States alone, the remote worker tax could raise $48 billion a year, enough to give a $1,500 grant to each of the estimated 29 million workers who cannot work from home and earn less than $30,000 per year, a pool that includes essential workers. Going back to news from the African continent, I think we finished all the Ethiopia stories. I'm going to bookmark them. Zambia to default on their foreign debt, the finance minister says. Zambia will not pay overdue Eurobond coupon before a grace period expires at the end of the day from the 13th of November 2020. Zambia missed the payment of 42.5 million coupon on one of its dollar-denominated sovereign bonds last month. The government requested bondholders granted deferral of interest payments until April as it struggled with the dual burdens of fighting the pandemic and a limping economy. But the creditors rejected the request earlier on Friday. I want to scream again. I want to scream again. Everybody that has been a part of my Twitch community or my YouTube community for a very long time has said that this day of reckoning was coming, when many nations were going to be defaulting on their debts, and were we going to trust the creditors to give them an extension? I think I'm not. I'm trying not to curse too much today. I'm trying to be a good news broadcaster. But these stories fucking piss me off. And there, I even dropped one out without intending to. The Zambia External Bondholder Committee, a large group of creditors holding more than 40% of Zambia's bonds and a blocking stake in each issue, already indicated it would reject the government's plan. If Zambia does not pay the coupon, it will be classified as a default on its 3 outstanding loans with a face value of $3 billion. With a number of African countries struggling with unsustainable debt, Zambia is being closely watched as a test case for how borrowers and creditors might navigate a broader debt crisis. Referring to a deal agreed with the China Development Bank last month, he said the bank had given a 6-month grace period on interest payments and a 3-year grace period on the principal payments for one loan. Data from Lusaka showed that Zambia's total external stock of debt stood at $4.8 billion, or 18% of GDP. By the end of 2014, 5 years later, it more than doubled to $11.2 billion, or 48% of the GDP. The IMF predicts a rise to 70% by the year end. I don't like you. 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 I fucking don't like you, IMF. The Eurobonds are not its only debt. Zambia owes $3.5 billion in bilateral debt, $2.1 billion multilaterals, and $2.9 billion to other commercial lenders. It owes about $3 billion to China and Chinese entities. And their currency, the kwacha, has tumbled nearly a third since the start of the year, adding to the pressure. I hate knowing what was going to happen in March. And now it's November, and it's coming true. And there is not shit that I can do about it. Except try to yell to people that it is going to be so much austerity for developing nations all around the world. Russia plans a naval base in Sudan. The planned deal, published on the Russian government's website, outlines a logistical support center to be set up in Sudan. They plan on building a naval base on the Red Sea coast to resupply their fleet. The planned deal, published on the Russian government's website on Wednesday, outlines a logistical support center to be set up in Sudan where repairs and resupply operations and rest for crew members can take place. The capacity will be capped at 300 military and civilian personnel and 4 ships, including nuclear-powered vessels. Russia will gain the right to transport via Sudan's ports and airports weapons, ammunition, and equipment needed for the base to function. The deal is slated to stand for 25 years, as long as neither party objects to its renewal. We are 1 hour into today's stream. If anybody likes what I do, you can follow me on Twitter, you can subscribe on YouTube, or if you really like my work, you can subscribe to the Patreon, you can give a donation via PayPal, or I do accept cryptocurrency now. This is my full-time job. I try to do a good job and take it seriously, so thank you everybody for your continued viewership and your continued support. Algerians have approved a new constitution after the referendum. Move seen as the government's maneuver to neutralize the Hirak movement, which called for the boycott of the plebiscite. Algerians have approved constitutional reforms in a referendum, though with a record low turnout, the country's constitutional council has announced. The referendum text was passed with 66.8% of votes cast, and they welcomed a transparent vote held under good conditions. The 23.8% turnout was a record low for a major vote in Algeria, with fewer than 15% of eligible voters endorsing the constitutional document. In a story I should have read with the Ethiopian news, Sudan is bracing for up to 200,000 people fleeing from the Ethiopian fighting. I thought I had a good article here about the Libyan conflict, but I cannot seem to find it. Here it is. No, that's not it either. Guinea arrests opposition leaders after the disputed election. Vice President of Guinea's leading opposition party, the UFDG, and others held as President Alpha Condé wins a controversial third term. Ghanaian police have launched a sweeping operation against opposition politicians and activists following deadly post-election violence in the West African country. They've arrested the Vice President of Guinea's leading opposition party, the Union of Democratic Forces of Guinea. More than 100 other people, mainly activists, have also been caught in the police dragnet. What a word, dragnet. The operation came after President Alpha Condé, 82, won a controversial third term after topping an October 18th poll with 59.5% of the votes. Opposition leader Chelou Diallo from the UFDG party declared himself victorious after the election and alleged voter fraud. The move triggered nationwide clashes between supporters and security forces, in which government said 21 people were killed. The UFDG put the death toll at 46. While observers from other African countries have backed the official results, France, the European Union, and the United States have cast doubt. Political tension in Guinea centers on Condé's third term, against which there have been rolling protests since October 2019. The president pushed through a new constitution in March, arguing it would modernize the country, but it also allowed him to bypass a 2-limit term for presidents. I am going to move away from the continent of Africa news, and we're going to step into, I think, India for a moment here. It seems like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stories about India, 9 stories about India. Let's go with the oldest one first. 13th of November, 11th of November, 11th of November, 12th of November, 12th of November, 12th, 13th, 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 12th. Okay. Let's go with the 11th here. India to regulate online news and social media sites. New order brings online news portals and content providers such as Netflix under the ambit of the government in a first step to regulate digital media. They issued an order bringing the regulation of online news portals and content providers such as Netflix under the authority of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting in a first step to regulate digital media. News on social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram will also come under the ministry, as will audio-visual content on online platforms, according to Wednesday's announcement. It's not clear if news portals from other countries would be included. While electronic media in India is regulated by the Cable Television Networks Regulation Act of 1995, there was no law or body to oversee digital content in the past. Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, writer and senior journalist, claims right-wing and conservative elements in the country, many of whom are the supporters of the ruling government, have been saying there is need to regulate the content on over-the-top platforms like Netflix, and it came up ostensibly because online platforms are showing films that do not come under the regulatory ambit of the CBFC, and they say you're showing a lot of explicit scenes which depict sex and violence. The design of the government behind this move is to control online media, both fiction and non-fiction. All the restrictions that exist on regular media, such as the law of defamation or various other constraints, they all apply to digital media. In a problem that I fear will arise in the United States due to the ways that the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine needs to be stored at temperatures matching an Antarctic winter, I think it will not only create a logistical nightmare for India, but I am afraid it will create a logistical nightmare for the United States. From my recollection, the vaccine needs to be kept at negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It can only be re-added. It can only have dry ice re-added like 2 or 3 times. It ships in units of 1,000, and the vaccine needs to be given 28 days apart. A logistical nightmare for India with heat waves exceeding 50 degrees Celsius, few ultra-cold freezers, patchy power, and a largely rural population. The new 2-shot vaccine from Pfizer has to be maintained at minus 80 degrees Celsius, negative 112 Fahrenheit. It's a new challenge that urgently needs to be managed. I'm almost positive it's 28 days apart, but somebody please fact check me. To ease distribution, Pfizer has announced it will provide a dry ice pack container for its vaccines that's able to maintain a temperature of minus 94 Fahrenheit for up to 10 days. The Pfizer vaccine is unlikely to make its way to India because the ultra-cold chain that it requires is something we may not be in position to handle. Thank you for the follow, Saria. Staying within India, but moving to the 12th of November, the Indian Central Bank data points to a first-ever recession. The Reserve Bank of India's figures suggest the economy shrank 8.6% in the July to September quarter, following a contraction in the previous 3 months. India has entered a technical recession in the first half of 2020-2021 for the first time in their history. Consumers cut back on spending as millions lost their jobs, preferring instead to squirrel away cash. Preliminary estimates presented in the central bank's bulletin showed a jump in household financial savings to 21.4% of GDP, up from 7.9% the same year ago, and 10% in January to March. The bulk of these savings are bank deposits. Surge in India's pollution levels explained in 500 words. Air quality has descended to near emergency levels as a haze of toxic smog envelopes vast swaths of northern India. As winter approaches each year, a haze of toxic smog envelopes vast swaths of northern India, including the capital of New Delhi, forcing authorities to shut schools and restrict the use of private vehicles. The air quality index hovered at above 475 on a scale of 500, near emergency levels. Anything above 60 is considered unhealthy. Why does it drop in the winter? It starts to deteriorate by the end of October, when lower temperatures, higher moisture, and a drop in wind speeds tend to trap pollutants in the atmosphere for longer. After the monsoon season ends in September, the wind direction also changes. Dust, industrial emissions, and vehicle exhaust gases bring a sharp spike in air pollution levels. A lack of resources means local authorities cannot effectively clamp down on illegal activities. Or illegal industries, I should say. New Delhi is the worst hit. Potentially farm fires have hurt as well. Also, from the 12th of November, India's capital sees a surge in COVID-19 infections ahead of Diwali. New Delhi reported 8,593 new infection cases on Wednesday, amid soaring pollution levels at the onset of winter, reaching their highest daily total. Whoops. Why aren't you scrolling? Window capture. There we go. In a stimulus boost, India gives more help to farms hit by the coronavirus. The latest measure brings India's total coronavirus relief package to 15% of GDP. The additional stimulus steps amount to about $120 billion, taking the nation's total virus relief to 15% of GDP. Equals the total spending envisaged by the government's budget for the year to March. The stimulus comes at a time when Modi's government doesn't have the money to pay even states their share of nationwide sales tax. Revenue collections have been hurt by the lockdown. Indian law on foreign funding, a tool to silence civil society. An international commission of jurists say the amendment to the FCRA law will obstruct the work of NGOs in the country. Rights defenders have criticized an amendment to the India Foreign Contributions Act, which oversees foreign funding to NGOs, with International Commission of Jurists saying it is a tool to silence civil society organizations in the South Asian nation. One moment, I apologize. In a briefing paper released on Thursday, the ICJ states that the FCRA is severely shrinking civil space in India and poses unnecessary obstacles to human rights defenders in India by unlawfully obstructing the work of NGOs in the country of 1.3 billion. The ICJ said that it fails to comply with India's international legal obligations to respect and protect the rights of freedom of association, expression, peaceful assembly, and the right to take part in the conduct of public affairs. It regulates foreign donations with the aim of ensuring that such donations do not adversely affect the national security of India. Originally enacted in 1976 with the aim to prevent foreign donations to political parties, the law has been amended to starve NGOs. On Wednesday, the Indian government amended the FCRA rules, making it tougher for NGOs to access foreign contributions. The NGO is now prohibited from transferring funds to another NGO. A Aadhaar card, the biometric ID, is mandatory for registration. I am going to look for a video to play, okay? That way I can snack real quick. Oh, that's not the video to play. 26 minutes too long.
Thank you very much for joining us. India and China are both accusing the other's soldiers of firing shots in a new confrontation along their disputed Himalayan border. China says Indian troops crossed the line of control in the western region on Monday and opened fire, and its soldiers took what it called countermeasures. But a short time ago, India's military laid the blame with China, accusing it of provocative measures to escalate tension. Both sides usually avoid using firearms in the area. We'll be live with Elizabeth Ranam in India's capital, New Delhi, in just a moment. But first to Katrina.
Why do they have a video from June playing? I don't understand that at all. Damn. I do not understand that at all. Why would you play a video from June? So much for me having my snack. Okay. In the article from the 13th of November, India-China close in on a plan to end months of a border standoff. Tens of thousands of rival troops have been deployed along the disputed Himalayan border since a deadly scuffle in June. They're formulating a plan that involves creating no patrol zones, pulling back tanks and artillery, and using drones to verify the withdrawal, as the nuclear-armed Asian rivals seek to end a dangerous military standoff in the Himalayas. We have a firm plan for disengagement on the table. It is being internally discussed on both sides. Chinese soldiers will dismantle defense structures on several hilly spurs overlooking the lake and pull back. India will also withdraw, it claims. I don't see it happening. I don't see it being in the benefit of either nation. India and Pakistan report deadly violence along the Kashmir border. Civilians among those killed and injured in cross-border fighting in the disputed Kashmir region. Thank you for the follow. Ten civilians and 5 security personnel. Yeah, now this one is much, I think, more intense. 10 civilians and 5 security personnel have been killed in cross-border shelling between India and Pakistan in one of the year's deadliest days along the heavy militarized frontier separating the nuclear-armed rivals. Indian officials said 6 civilians, 3 soldiers, and a border guard were killed on their side. The Pakistan military said 4 civilians and 1 soldier were killed on the Pakistani side. 20 others wounded. Deaths and damage are being reported from the Neelum Valley. They're fighting over control of Kashmir. They've been fighting over control of Kashmir for decades. I agree, Zero, she flies. This is also one of the... I would say if there was actually a hot war potential, I would have to say that this is one of the ones that is the closest to taking place. Now, I know that there is a hot war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and that seems to be winding down. But from my estimation and my analysis, this seems to be the one that at any moment could devolve into a massive conflict that would reverberate around the world. This is definitely a dangerous conflict, not only for the civilians, but for neighboring countries as well. I 100% agree here. Bangladesh extends a school shutdown over a second COVID-19 wave. This seems to be a pretty quick article. They're facing another surge of infections with 427,000 cases and 6,100 deaths from COVID-19. Short story. Okay, we are making progress. We're down to 47 more to go. We started around 80 stories. So we've got through about 30 so far. I don't exactly know the answer. Moses. Somebody else will be up. Somebody in my community is going to be better knowledgeable than I, and they'll be able to answer. Bouncing over to Europe. Germany charges 12 people In a far-right terror plot, 11 of the men arrested in the countrywide raids in February stand accused of membership of a terrorist organization in a retell of an earlier story. They've charged 12 alleged far-right conspirators suspected of planning terrorist attacks on politicians, asylum seekers, and Muslims, Security Service told AFP news agency on Thursday. The 12th alleged conspirator had been charged with supporting a terrorist group. Is this going to be a quick story? Yeah.
We are the people, they chant. A rallying cry used against the East German government a quarter-century ago, but with very different overtones now. We're the people, it suggests. The Muslim immigrants are not.
Da hat keiner danach gefragt, was vorher bei mir war.
The group, after all, calls itself the European Patriots against the Islamization of the West.
Ja, was ist daran das Problem, wenn es so ist? Dann,
If the spread of Islam continues, we'll have an Islamic state here. I don't want that. I don't want to live in a state governed by Sharia law.
also ich möchte nicht in einem
The conflict in Syria and Iraq has sparked fears and tensions in Germany and focused attention on immigrants. Supporters of the group known as the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant clashed with Kurdish demonstrators in October. Last Friday, a German man was found guilty of belonging to ISIL.
The latest numbers show that among Western countries, Germany is now the second biggest destination for immigrants after the United States. It is also the biggest destination for refugees in Europe. Some 200,000 asylum requests are expected this year.
In another part of Dresden, supporters of immigration also rallied. They say the anti-immigration rally is made up of neo-Nazis, football hooligans, as well as ordinary citizens who are a little bit confused.
Yeah, we are here to say it loud that we want to be a welcome nation for all refugees on all over the world.
There are not even immigrants in Dresden. It's totally stupid.
The anti-immigrant rallies have been by and large peaceful. While the numbers aren't huge, usually in the low thousands, some 40% of Germans now say they're worried about the spread of Islam in their country. Nick Spicer, Al Jazeera, Dresden.
In a story I do not know enough about, I've fallen behind. Peru president faces calls to resign after protesters have been killed from today. Peruvian interim president Manuel Merino is under growing pressure to resign after half his new cabinet stepped down following the deaths of 2 people in protests over the sudden removal of the predecessor. Congress head Luis Valdez said in a statement to Channel 9 Television, "I asked Mr. Merino to evaluate his immediate resignation." The ultimatum came after news of 2 deaths of protesters during a massive peaceful march in the capital Lima, which was violently repressed by police firing shotgun pellets and tear gas. 94 people were hospitalized with injuries sustained during the protests. The police tactics have been criticized by the United Nations and rights organizations such as Amnesty International since the protest began on Tuesday. 9 of the 18 ministers in Merino's cabinet announced their resignation after the police crackdown. Police again using tear gas fired from helicopters. Wow. Jesus. And a story from 2 days ago. Peru fired up. Protests erupt amid a political crisis. Peruvians are protesting after the country's president, Martin Vizcarra, was impeached over allegations he received bribes. The clashes and other more peaceful protests in the capital and other cities are piling pressure on a fragmented Congress and the new government of Merino. Vizcarra, a politically unaffiliated centrist who is popular with voters, was removed on Monday in an impeachment trial over allegations he received bribes, an accusation he denies. Now Merino, a member of the center-right Popular Action Party, who had been the Congress head, swore in his new cabinet on Thursday and called for calm. This was a story that hurt when I was clicking it up today. Does Mexico have one of the highest fatality rates of any nation of COVID-19 at the moment right now? Reaches 1 million COVID-19 cases and nears 100,000 deaths. That sounds to be one of the highest fatality rates of anywhere in the world. Between, 9 and 10%? Since the pandemic began, Mexico has managed to administer only about 2.5 million tests to their citizens. Only seriously ill people get tested in Mexico. Testing only 1.9% of the population since the pandemic began made it hard, if not impossible, to effectively trace. Damn. They're only doing around 10,000 daily tests. Holy fuck. This is where, goddamn, if the United States meant anything at all anymore. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States actually could have regained some semblance of trust on the world stage. We could have done so much help with food aid, with testing supplies, with ramping up manufacturing of PPE and so forth, but we didn't. And goddamn does it hurt to call myself an American, knowing we, one of the nation's richest countries in the world, did basically nothing for the international community. Basically nothing. It hurts. It just really hurts. Yeah, right? We led the world in misinformation too. Exactly. I don't know, Data Love. I don't know. Honduras and Guatemala brace for the next incoming storm. Still reeling from Eta, Central America is expecting heavy rain and winds from Tropical Storm Iota on Monday. I think this was the one you were talking about earlier, John McCain's ghost. Iota is already a record-setting system, being the 30th named storm of the year, is extraordinarily busy Atlantic hurricane season. In an unsurprising story from Brazil, deforestation in Brazil's Amazon rises for the first time in 4 months. Brazilians are clearing the Amazon faster amid Jair Bolsonaro's weakened environmental enforcement. Deforestation rose 50% from the previous year to 836 square kilometers, 323 square miles. My God. destruction in 2020 continues to be far higher than in the years before Bolsonaro assumed office in January 1st, 2019. Researchers predict an estimated 5,400 square miles deforested for 2020 compared with 3,911 for 2019, the highest deforestation since 2006. Peruvian youth are going to be staying in the streets, they say. Marino, listen up, the people reject you. Human Rights Watch said that there was legal authority to remove him. Okay, we have one final story, potentially from India. Potatoes are a key part of the northern India diet. The prices are currently surging at an alarming rate, which could potentially lead to a potato famine. Okay, we're down to 37 more to go. We've got a couple stories here from Israel. So let's hit up Israel, Palestine. We're going to take a shift over to the Middle East. So we've got Palestine news, Israel, Iran deny claims of the Al-Qaeda member killed. There was the Libyan War article I was looking for. I guess I missed that one for Ethiopia. So, okay. Palestinian Prime Minister states a Pompeo visit would set a dangerous precedent. Next week, Mike Pompeo could be the first United States Secretary of State to visit an illegal Israeli settlement. Palestinian Premier Mohammed Shataya has said that a planned visit next week by the United States Secretary of State to an illegal Israeli settlement in the occupied West Bank would set a dangerous precedent. Pompeo would become the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit one of the settlements, which are considered illegal by most of the international community. The visit planned for next week is a way to legitimize the settlements and creates a dangerous precedent that violates international law. Pompeo's visit to Israel comes exactly 1 year after he said the United States did not consider Jewish settlements on occupied Palestinian territory to be illegal. The latest approvals in October raised the number of illegal settlement homes to more than 12,150, the highest number since Peace Now began keeping figures. Pompeo is going there to solidify his political ambitions for the future, I would say, probably. Israel attacks Hamas positions after rockets fired from Gaza. Airstrikes and tank fire came after 2 rockets were fired into southern Israel from the Gaza Strip. Israeli army tweeted that it struck Hamas underground infrastructure and military posts in Gaza and is conducting an ongoing situational assessment and remains prepared to operate against any terror activity. And further settlement news from Israel. Israel advances plans in sensitive East Jerusalem settlement. Settlement watchdog says the Israel Land Authority opened tenders for more than 1,200 new homes in East Jerusalem. A settlement watchdog group says Israel is moving ahead with their new construction of hundreds of homes in an illegal East Jerusalem settlement that threatens to cut off parts of the city claimed by Palestinians from the West Bank. The group, Peace Now, said the Israel Land Authority announced on its new website on Sunday that it opened up tenders for more than 1,200 new homes in Givat Hamatos in East Jerusalem. Pompeo is set to travel there this week. With nearly 500,000 settlers now living in the West Bank and more than 220,000 others in East Jerusalem, the Palestinians say the chances of establishing their state are quickly dwindling. Netanyahu has been emboldened under Trump. Okay, so I don't exactly know this upcoming story that I'm about to read here. All right, so we have two conflicting messages. So in a report from the New York Times, Israeli agents killed Al-Qaeda's number 2 in Iran in August, and Iran denies the claim that the member was killed. So we're gonna have to read each of these here. Okay, so in the New York Times, it's claimed that Al-Qaeda's second-in-command, accused of helping mastermind the 1998 bombings of 2 embassies in Africa, was killed in Iran in August by Israeli operatives acting at the behest of the United States. Abdullah Ahmed Abdullah, who went by the nom de guerre Abu Muhammad al-Masri, was shot dead by 2 men on a motorcycle in Tehran more than 3 months ago, the U.S. newspaper reported. It's unclear what, if any, role the United States had in the killing. Iran then says, Tehran says Washington and Israel are trying to advance their information war against Iran. They reject the claims that a top Al-Qaeda figure was killed in Tehran in August. After news of the shooting broke, news media in Iran identified the victims as Lebanese history professor Habib Daoud and his daughter Maryam. A Lebanese news channel and a number of unofficial social media accounts said Daoud was a member of Hezbollah, the Iran-backed political and armed group in Lebanon. But the Times report said Daoud was an alias Iranian officials gave al-Masri, and the history teaching job was a cover. I'll have to keep researching that to find out what comes of it. The Saudi minister slams the German arms ban after being extended multiple times. Germany's ban on arms exports to Saudi Arabia will once again be up for discussion. They criticized the arms export ban on the Gulf Kingdom as wrong and illogical and said it does not need German military equipment. Well, no, you don't need it when you got President Donny T. Some European nations halted weapon sales to Riyadh after it launched a military campaign in 2015 in neighboring Yemen, which the United Nations now calls the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The idea that weapon sales were stopped to Saudi Arabia because of the Yemen War is illogical. We think it's wrong because we think the war in Yemen is a legitimate war. It's a war that we were forced into. Before the ban, Germany did brisk business with the kingdom with an export volume of $550 million in the third fiscal quarter of 2017. Yeah, it probably is the worst. I mean, the entire nation is in poverty and famine and literally starving to death. So it probably actually is the worst. Well, it's either, yeah, I would say Yemen, and then the Rohingya, and then, I don't know, well, I mean, who wants to really compare them, but yeah, it's terrible. Saudi Arabia was the world's top arms importer, spending $16.9 billion on weapons in the period between 2014 and 2018. My God. More than 100,000 people have been killed in the war in Yemen, according to the Armed Conflict Location and Event data, including 12,000 civilians. According to the United Nations World Food Program, 24 million Yemenis are in need of humanitarian assistance, with 20 million being food insecure. I do have an article that is going to be a content warning. It's about to show starving children. So I don't often give content warning when I read stories, but when there's imagery that's going to be a little bit tough, I will give a content warning. If I can find it. Maybe I can't find it. Where'd it go? Here. Countdown to catastrophe in Yemen as the United Nations again warns of famine. Yemenis not going hungry, they're being starved, says United Nations as it warns of a looming famine. And I think you saw how emaciated the child was. We're in a catastrophe. We've been here before. We did almost the same dog and pony show. We sounded the alarm then. 80% of the country's 30 million people are in need of help. I don't even want to really show the images. They even make me sick. Yemenis are not going hungry, they're being starved. If anybody's wondering why I just banned that person from my channel, they created their account 13 minutes ago. If you want to appeal your ban, it's not that hard to do, but I have a hard time believing you could find my channel that quickly in 13 minutes in the just chatting section. Louis Dreyfus sells stake in a family business to the Abu Dhabi Fund. Billionaire Margarita Louis Dreyfus opens a family business to outside ownership for the first time, agreeing to sell a 45% stake in the storied agricultural trader to Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund. Hello. Louis Dreyfus, who controls more than 96% of the holding company that owns LDC, has been scrambling to raise funds after borrowing $1 billion to buy out other family members and pledging some of her shares in the family business as collateral. The agreement with the Abu Dhabi Wealth Fund will reduce some pressure. They're acquiring a minority stake in one of the 4 largest traders of grains, oilseeds, and sugar. Will help boost food security for the UAE at a time when governments around the world are accelerating efforts to ensure they can feed their citizens. Syria's president says United States pressure obstructing return of refugees. Bashar al-Assad says millions of refugees are being forced to stay in host countries by pressure and intimidation. From November 11th, there are many hurdles, he claims, citing United States sanctions at the opening of a conference in Damascus that has been boycotted by Washington, the European Union, and most of Syria's neighbors that host the bulk of the 5.6 million refugees. Of Syria's 17 million people, 5.5 are living as refugees in the region, mostly in Turkey, and a further 6 million are uprooted within their country. Western countries and all of Syria's neighbors, with the exception of Lebanon, say conditions are not safe for the voluntary return of refugees, many of whom fled from Russia and the Syrian government bombing their towns during the course of a decade-old conflict. The priority at present is real action to create conditions for safe, voluntary, dignified, sustainable return of refugees and internally displaced persons to their areas of origin. It would also help if the United States didn't arm many of the rebel fighters there. So, if we're gonna claim what some of the problems are, let's claim all of them. The 9-year war has displaced millions and killed nearly 500,000 people, leaving Syria torn into rival areas controlled by different groups, backed by regional or international players. Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, the Saudi king, urges the world to take decisive stance against Iran. From the 12th of November, to address efforts by Iran to develop nuclear and ballistic missile programs, in the annual address to the top government advisory body. The kingdom stresses the dangers of Iran's regional project, its interference in other countries, its fostering of terrorism, its fanning of flames of sectarianism, and calls for a decisive stance from the international community against Iran that guarantees a drastic handling of its efforts to obtain weapons of mass destruction and develop ballistic missiles program. They were the 84-year-old ruler's first public remarks since he addressed the United Nations General Assembly in September via video link. Right, Narvis? I think this is the final piece of news from Saudi Arabia. The Saudi Red Sea Project plans 16 hotels by 2023 to boost tourism. Owned by a Saudi sovereign fund and backed by Mohammed bin Salman, the project entails developing luxury resorts on 50 islands. The project aims to attract 300,000 visitors annually, as they think there will be a lot of pent-up demand to go and travel as soon as the restrictions are lifted. So I see a V-shaped recovery certainly insofar as tourism is concerned. Now, I actually do agree that there will be a tourism boom if COVID vaccines ever get deployed to a majority of the world. So, I understand their thinking. I don't know what year it's going to be, but it actually tracks with me. The kingdom wants tourism to contribute 10% of GDP by 2030. I don't think you're going to make it. United Nations expert calls for immediate lifting of sanctions against Qatar. Report says Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE, and Bahrain are in violation of human rights due to punitive measures against Doha. The only way that happens is if they lower... Well, no, it could happen also if oil just stays low. If the barrel of oil stays cheap. So the reason that I don't think that oil prices are going to rise anytime soon is the Saudi government has balanced their budget for the next 3 years at a prediction of $50 per barrel of oil. So they're assuming that oil is going to average $50 a barrel until 2023. An independent United Nations expert has urged countries which are blockading Qatar as part of a regional dispute led by Saudi Arabia to immediately lift all sanctions against Doha. Sorry for the distractions, everyone. In 2017, an air, land, and sea blockade was imposed by Qatar by 4 Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, UAE, and Bahrain. The blocking states cut diplomatic and trade ties with Doha, claiming it supported terrorism and that its ties with Iran were too close. Qatar has vehemently rejected the claims and said there was no legitimate justification. A full brief will be presented to the United Nations Human Rights Council in September of 2021. Wait, you're going to wait until September of 2021? Okay. I sometimes the pace of the world, it really just destroys me. We are 2 hours into the program today, and once an hour, I do try to bring awareness to, what I do. If you like my work at all, there are a couple different ways that you can support the channel. I've been doing this for it'll be 2 years in February. I usually broadcast around like 28 or 29 days a month, maybe 30. Lately, it's been a long streak. The best ways to help me are following me on Twitter, subscribing on YouTube. If you want to support the channel financially, of which donations do all the backing of it, you can donate a little bit of money into my PayPal account. You can subscribe to the Patreon. I don't put any content on my Patreon. I don't agree with having anything behind paywalls. but the recurring subscription, the recurring payment does give stability. Or you can donate a little bit of cryptocurrency if you are one of the people that has taken the orange pill or whatever other cryptocurrency pills you may say. At least 74 migrants are dead in a devastating shipwreck off of Libya. The IOM says the Coast Guard and fishermen brought 47 survivors back to shore while rescue operation continues. I saw about that one, Dustin. 74. Oh my God. My God. You know, I'm just sitting here thinking that the European Union, they pay Libya to train them how to deport refugees that are trying to cross back into Libya, rather than trying to do anything to resettle refugees and asylum seekers. Okay, what do we have left to cover? We have the Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict, Moldova, tensions in Libya, violence in Mozambique, clashes in the Ivory Coast, Nigerian protests, Afghan terror attacks, Pakistan bomb maker, Afghan journalists, development banks, Afghanistan news, Libyan conflict. That can come back up here somewhere. Okay, let's keep going here. We're down to 24 left to go. I am probably not going to make it through all these. We're doing a podcast today in 49 minutes. It is Tales from the Crypto, a podcast about blockchain, cryptocurrency, and all things DeFi Deco, beginning in now 48 minutes. It'll be episode 2. The first episode was a good success. I think we almost hit 100 views on YouTube. 99 views for the first episode. So that went pretty well. I learned a lot from it, and we will be doing the second one today. I love how I've got 3 hate watchers. Oh, there were 3 downvotes on my YouTube channel before, but one of the people that downvoted must have been like, all right, this guy's not all that bad. Okay, so I don't really know anything about this article at all. 3 years after the Mugabe overthrow, many Zimbabweans say life is worse. Peekaboo Shiny. If you are going to do that, if you use my referral code, if you buy $100 worth of any cryptocurrency, you can you get $10 of Bitcoin for free, and I get $10 of Bitcoin for free. So if you do get involved at all, go ahead and use the referral code. That way we both make a little bit of extra. My impressions of incent? I don't know what that is. 3 years after the Mugabe overthrow, many Zimbabweans say life is worse. Prospects of job creation and economic growth in the post-Mugabe era continue to remain bleak. With no source of income and no job prospects on the horizon, Chief Adede took his two-wheeled steel pushcart and offered to ferry heavy goods for an agreed fee around Kuwadzana, a high-density suburb. It's the only job he's known since then. Oh my God. Zimbabwe is in the throes of deepening economic crisis, characterized by high inflation of 700%. Foreign currency shortages, and a devastating mix of rapidly weakening currency and stagnant salaries. Zimbabwe was facing the worst hunger crisis in 10 years, with 7.7 million people food insecure. I don't know how long that 700% took. USD to Zimbabwe dollar. Yeah, I can't find a good source for it. Zimbabwe adopted the use of the United States currency in 2009 after hyperinflation decimated the value of the local currency. But by early 2016, a shortage of dollars prompted authorities to introduce bond notes, a surrogate currency which largely traded on par with the dollar. In November of 2017, annualized inflation stood around 2.97%, but just a year after Mnangagwa took over, inflation hit double-digit territory at 31%. Annualized inflation was measured at 175.66% in June last year, up from 97.85% in May. Inflation for September was measured at 659.4%. after peaking at 837%. Hyperinflation has seen the value of earnings for Zimbabweans decimated. There's a black market for the currencies. My God. Authorities blame the sanctions imposed by the United States and the European Union for the economic woes. Fucking goddamn. Hello, Carpe. Sent it to my Twitter DM. I'll look through it. I never heard about it before. Here's a graph of the currency. Huge spike indeed. Okay. Yeah, there you go. God damn. One of these days, everybody, I'm going to be wrong about predicting hyperinflation. And that is the day that we are going to get together and drink champagne. All I want to do, most of my long-term viewers, you know that I don't want to be right. And one of these days, we won't be. Until then, though. Alright, we're going to do about 5 more of these stories, and then I need to get prepared for the podcast, of which I am not prepared for today. Universal healthcare critical in COVID-19 pandemic, say the experts. Public health experts say universal healthcare, including free COVID-19 testing and treatment, makes a big difference during a pandemic. Phillips has $14,000 in medical bills. His hospital received $145 million through the CARES Act, but it did not cover the entire financial gap. The cost of medical care is ridiculous. People are going into more debt just to fight it. COVID death rate in Canada is less than half of that in the United States. The cost of treatment and testing for COVID-19 in the United States can vary widely, with one COVID-19 survivor being billed $1.1 million by a hospital in Seattle, a sum that was later covered by Medicare. The Kaiser Foundation found testing facilities charged from $20 to $850 per tests, the cost exceeding Medicare coverage for testing, which ranges from $51 to $100. Oh my God, United States. When are you going to learn? Are you ever going to learn anything? Okay, what else do I want to read here? Let's go with some Afghanistan news. Maybe we can finish up this Afghanistan stuff, and then I will have to I'll have to bump these other articles until the next day. You're right, Carpe. Pakistani al-Qaeda bomb maker killed in Afghanistan. National Directorate of Security says Mohammed Hanif, originally from Karachi, also had close relations with the Taliban. Thank you, Dustin, for subscribing on YouTube. A Pakistani bomb maker who trained Taliban members before switching allegiance to al-Qaeda has been killed in a security operation in western Afghanistan. The agency said Hanif, who was originally from Karachi, had close relations with the Taliban and helped train fighters in making car bombs and improvised explosive devices. Okay, we've got 3 more stories from Afghanistan. A suicide car bomb blast in Kabul kills many soldiers. The explosion targeted a government forces checkpoint near the gate of the Afghan capital, killing at least 3 soldiers and wounding 4 others. The explosion on Friday targeted a government forces checkpoint near the gate of the capital of Kabul. No one immediately claimed responsibility. The attack on the checkpoint follows weeks of violence, including an attack by gunmen earlier this month that killed 22 people. mostly students of Kabul University. On Thursday, Taliban fighters attacked a government security forces checkpoint in northern Kunduz province, killing 5 soldiers and wounding 2 others. In mostly good news, Afghan forces captured the mastermind of the Kabul University attack. 22 people were killed when 3 gunmen rampaged through the university on the 2nd of November. The mastermind has been arrested. Adil was recruited by the Haqqani network, Salah said. The attack was carried out to pressure, defame, and make the government look weak in front of the people. The Haqqani network, Adil hailed from the province of Panjshir, but his family lived on the outskirts of Kabul. Adil had been missing for 3 years amid rumors he'd gone to receive training in war and fighting. The shadowy Haqqani network, an affiliate of the Taliban, has long been accused of carrying out assaults on Western military forces and has been branded a terrorist group by the United States. Okay, so the stories that we did not get to, due to time constraints for today, were the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict, Moldova tensions, the Libyan conflict, violence in Mozambique, an opinion piece about France still being a colonial colony, or a colonial country, Ivory Coast clashes, Nigerian and SARS protests, an Afghan journalist killed, how will Biden relations be with Afghanistan, climate action via development banks, a bus attack in Ethiopia, pipeline between the United States and China, and the ASEAN Trade Pact.